Okay, grammar skill number 8 is apostrophes, and with that we have reached the end of our regularly scheduled grammar skills for the semester. So in celebration of that, all right, now that you hopefully feel thoroughly celebrated, we'll dive into apostrophes. So apostrophes are primarily used to show possession, and today we're going to study the 5 major rules for using apostrophes to show possession. So go ahead and jot those down as we walk through them. The first is singular possessive nouns. The second is plural possessive nouns. The third is possessive nouns ending in S. The fourth is irregular plural possessive nouns, and the fifth is compound subject possessive nouns. So we'll take some time to go through all of those different cases and the special rules that go with each. Before we move forward, just to be sure everyone understands what possession means, when we say apostrophes are used to show possession, that means they're used to show ownership. So you use that to indicate a noun possesses the thing that follows it. So let's look at some examples with these various rules. All right, so for the first rule, apostrophes for singular possessive nouns. The rule is to simply add an apostrophe S to the end of the word to show possession. This is a pretty simple rule, and you probably have this one down, but let's just go through it quickly to make sure. So Kevin is a singular noun. We add an apostrophe S to make him possessive of his dog. The king is a singular noun. We add an apostrophe S to make it possessive of his crown. His wife is a singular noun. We add an apostrophe S to make her possessive of her happiness. And Joanne is a singular noun. We add an apostrophe S to make her possessive of her birthday. That's a very simple case. We simply add that apostrophe S to show possession. The same rule applies for plural possessive nouns, except now we add an apostrophe after the S. So for most plural nouns, they already end in S. So for example, neighbors, kings, and kids. These are typical plural nouns and that they have simply added an S to their singular form. And all you need to do with these typical plural nouns is add apostrophes after the S to indicate possession. So the neighbors' dogs, the king's crowns, the kids' birthdays. The plural form of the word becomes possessive by simply adding an apostrophe after that last S. Okay, so far so good. Now is where it starts to get a bit more complicated. So apostrophes for singular nouns ending in S. Sometimes you deal with singular nouns and those singular nouns just happen to end with S. So this is where it gets a bit tricky because many style guides disagree on how to treat singular nouns that end in S. The best practice that we've come across is to follow your own pronunciation. So if the possessive form has an extra syllable, then add the apostrophe S. Otherwise, just add the apostrophe. This becomes a bit clearer if you look at a few examples. So let's take a look. So in this first example, notice how I pronounce the possessive form. Tess's bad luck. This singular noun Tess is pronounced Tess's in its possessive form. So we've chosen to add the apostrophe S to indicate that possession. Whereas in the second sentence or phrase, goodness sake, we don't add that extra syllable. We don't say goodness's sake. We simply say goodness sake. So in this case, we're going to indicate possession by simply adding the apostrophe. Similarly, William's poem. If we had a singular word such as Williams that ended in S already, we'd simply add an apostrophe to indicate William's poem as opposed to Williams's poems. But in the next sentence, the class's attitude, you pronounce it by saying classes. So to reflect that pronunciation, we're going to go ahead and add an apostrophe S. And in the last one, we'd probably say Ulysses' voyage. Because we don't have that extra syllable, we're simply going to add the apostrophe. So this is probably the most subjective of all the rules, meaning you have to apply some interpretation. But simply take the singular noun that ends in S, say it out loud, and notice if you're pronouncing that extra syllable, such as in Tess's bad luck. And if so, then add your extra apostrophe S. But if it's a case like goodness sake and you're not adding any extra syllable, then simply add the apostrophe to make that singular noun possessive. So hopefully that makes sense. That seems to be the best way that we've come across to explain that. All right, the next rule is apostrophes for irregular plural nouns. And when we say irregular plural nouns, we mean nouns that become plural in irregular or kind of weird ways. So here's the rule. If the irregular plural noun ends in S, then just add an apostrophe at the end of the word. But if the word does not end in S, then add the apostrophe S to the end of the word. Again, this becomes a bit clearer when we actually look at the examples. So in this case, we have a singular noun, mouse. Notice this irregular plural form, mice. What makes it irregular is, for most singular nouns, you simply add an S to make it plural. So for most nouns, you'd say mouses. We know that's not the case, and there's this weird irregular rule to make it mice. So the way that you make mice possessive is to add the apostrophe S, and that's because mice didn't end with an S to begin with, so it needed an apostrophe S to become possessive. But wife, which becomes wifes in its irregular plural form, does end in S, so all you need to make that irregular plural noun possessive is an apostrophe. Child becomes children, which does not end in an S, so it needs an apostrophe S to become plural. Cactus becomes cacti, so that needs an apostrophe S to become plural. Sheep stays sheep, and it needs an apostrophe S because it doesn't end in an S here. Thief, however, becomes thieves, and because it has that existing S there, we simply add an apostrophe to make that plural noun possessive. Hippopotamus becomes hippopotami. Without an S here, we need an apostrophe S for possession. And similarly, syllabus becomes syllabi, and you add the apostrophe S to make it possessive. So basically, nouns that are irregular in their plural form that do not end in S like mice take the apostrophe S like mices to become possessive, whereas irregular plural nouns that do end in S like thieves simply take the apostrophe to become possessive. So kind of a weird trick, and this only applies to those irregular plural nouns, which you won't come across too often. All right, the next rule is apostrophes for compound possessive nouns. That is a mouthful. The rule is to use the apostrophe and the S after the second name only if two people possess the same item. So when we're dealing with compound possessive nouns, that means we've got two nouns possessing something. To apply the rule correctly, it's telling us here that you only add the apostrophe and S after the second name if those two people possess the same item. But you use the apostrophe and S after both names if the people do not possess the same item. I don't know why there's a period there. All right, so again, this becomes a bit clearer when you look at the example. So let's look at Caesar and Maribel, who have a variety of ownership here. Okay, Caesar and Maribel's home. Let's take a look at that compound possessive noun. It's compound again because we have two people, Caesar and Maribel. In this case, Caesar and Maribel own the same home. This indicates joint ownership, meaning both nouns own the home. And because that's the case, we don't need to give them both a possessive form. We only need to give this second noun a possessive form. So we choose there to add the apostrophe S only to Maribel's name, not Caesar and Maribel, because they're both owning the same thing. But in this sentence, Caesar's and Maribel's job contracts, that indicates separate ownership because both Caesar and Maribel have their own job contracts. So in this case, they each need an apostrophe S to indicate that separate ownership. They have separately owned job contracts. However, we could have written the sentence, Caesar and Maribel's job contracts, in which case Caesar and Maribel are owning the same job contracts because we only put an apostrophe S after Maribel's name, so that indicates joint ownership. So basically the rule with compound possessive nouns is you need to decide, do they own the thing together or do they own the thing separately? And that will determine how many apostrophe S's you need to add to the compound possessive noun. Okay, that reaches the end of our 5 rules for apostrophes. So pause the screencast, attempt the exercise, and continue playing when you're done. All right, let's see how you did. The first exercise simply paired correct and incorrect sentences, and you needed to make sure you understood why it was incorrect, so I'll just kind of walk you through that. The first sentence, Rachel's car died again, is correct because we have the singular noun Rachel, so we simply add an apostrophe S to make her plural. Over here, we did not have the apostrophe S. We did not indicate possession, which was needed for that sentence. Whereas in sentence number 2, the Sings spent Thanksgiving, there's no possession there. Nobody's owning anything. The Sings are simply spending Thanksgiving in Paris. So this sentence is incorrect because it implies ownership or possession where it really doesn't belong. Number 3, all of the village's mayors attended. This word here is kind of the key, all of the villages. That means it's a plural noun, and we know that plural nouns that end in S simply take an apostrophe to become plural. This treats it as a singular noun, and that can't be the case because it just told us all of the villages. So it can't just be a singular village and its mayor. Number 4, she purchased 3 new pairs of shoes. There's no possession in that sentence. Nothing is owning anything else. So it's incorrect to make pairs possessive. And number 5, the 3 hippopotami's teeth were large. Remember, hippopotami was the irregular plural form of the word hippopotamus, and to make irregular plural nouns that do not end in S plural, we simply add the apostrophe S. This is taking the singular form of hippopotamus, making a plural hippopotamuses, which is not the correct plural form, and adding an apostrophe. So that would be incorrect. All right, hopefully you understood those 5 sentences. Let's take a look at the second practice. The first sentence, her husband's wallet was full of curious items. So we're hoping that she only has one husband, and if that's the case, then B should be the correct answer because the singular noun husband becomes possessive with an apostrophe S, whereas C indicates that she has multiple husbands, which we hope is not the case. Number 2, I went to the editor-in-chief's house for dinner last night. Now this one looks a little bit tricky because we have this kind of sort of compound a noun situation, but really it's just a elongated noun, and all we need to do is make the last word in the noun possessive. It's simply one editor-in-chief's house, right? And so we simply add the apostrophe S to make that singular noun possessive. So the answer should be B, because it's not many chief's house, like which that one applies. And number 3, you may not enter Mr. Harris's office without his permission. The pronunciation there should have guided our answer. Notice how I said Mr. Harris's. Because I pronounced that singular noun that ends in S with an extra syllable, then I'm going to choose A because it reflects that pronunciation. The other forms don't reflect that Harris's pronunciation. Okay, 4. What are your children's names? So children as a plural noun does not end in S. So remember, to make plural nouns possessive, we add the apostrophe S if they don't already end in S. Number 5, so that should be B. Number 5, choose the correct answer. So the women's dresses, this is a very similar case. Women is a plural noun that doesn't end in S. So to make it possessive, we add the apostrophe S. And I'll just pause here to point out that this is one of the more common apostrophe errors I see in writing because people tend to want to do this answer or this answer. But remember, as a plural noun, children and women do not end in S, so it doesn't make a sense to simply add an apostrophe as the C option implies. Instead, take the plural noun and add the apostrophe S to make it possessive. Number 6, the salesman decided that the rings were not for sale. There's no possession in this sentence. The rings are not owning or possessing anything. So we're going to choose B because it doesn't indicate possession. There's no apostrophe here. And number 7, Billy and Bobby's mom would not let the brothers play outside. So this is one of our compound noun situations. So we have to ask ourselves, is there joint or individual ownership? Do Billy and Bobby have the same mom? And the way the sentence is written, yes, it seems that they do share the same mom because they're brothers. So to indicate joint ownership, we only give our second noun possession. So we'd say Billy and Bobby's mom would not let the brothers play outside. So that answer should be B. All right, that reaches the end of apostrophes. Hopefully you feel pretty strong about this rule and you will do well in your post-test next week.